Okay, so yesterday, the last thing we learned was about the Isser of Sarita, and that it applies equally to one Sarita for 5 nefashos, and we learned that out of Nefesh. And it also applies to 5 Sritas for 1 Nefesh. Okay. We also had a Machloikis, Tanoim, whether or not Srita and Gedida is the same, and they each include an Isser, Sai Bekeli, Sai Biyad, or if Srita is Biyad and Gedir is Bekli, which takes us to 5 lines on the top on Daf Chof Aleph, Amud Aleph. This is really tomorrow's Daf, and I'm trying to get ahead. Tani Tana Kamed Reb Yochanan. Al Meis, if someone does Srita al Meis, Bein Biyad, Bein Bekli would be Chayiv. But Al Avoidus Kechavim, and Rashi tells us that there was an avodah zorah that required that as an avodah, as Rashi says, the yesh avodah kechavim she'oivdin oisa bekach. That was the method of how this avodah zorah was served. She'oisin b'v'soram chaburis uptois. They make wounds in themselves. But Allah is biyad chayiv. If he did it by hand, it's chayiv because that's the method of its avodah. V'chli potter. The pasuk seems to say otherwise. It says, "Vayiskoyedu kimishbatam." They did the gedida. What did they do it with? The charavaysu with swords and with spears. So clearly they were cutting their skin with kalim. Ella, let's switch it. Ema biyad potter, because that's not the way the avodah zarah is served. And the kli chayiv. Doctor about the chayiv ala roish. Your chayiv for cutting off peyos. Machvi Rab Sheishes bein tirkiresha. He showed on his own head that it goes from here to here is where the peyos is from. There were 5 places where it would be usher to cut. Machvi Rab Sheishes bein tirkadikna, and he showed the 5 places. And according to Rashi, that was where the left and right jaw join the skull. There's the center of the jaw, and then there's the chin area. Okay, Levaltic. Rabbi Eliezer Omer im Notlon. Eliezer said if he took him with a rehitni or with tweezers of some type, it's going to be aser. Kasover chad lavu. No, sorry. He says im Notlon b'vasachas. If you took all of the points of his beard off at one time, you only got 1 Makos because it's chad alafu. The Tanakama says the issue of cutting one's beard is only with a razor, while Eliezer said it's even if it's with a tweezer. Where does this machlokes come from? A famous machlokes. Tanu Rabbanan ufa'as zekonam lo yigalechu. It says ufa'as zekonam lo yigalechu, but this it says, I believe, in relation to kohanim. It says lo yikachu korcha b'rosham. Which is going on a kohen. Later on, it's referring to a yid, to a regular Yisrael. All yidin, it says lo shakivu pas roshchem v'lo sashchis es pa'asa konecha. So when talking to all of Klal Yisrael, the Torah mentions hashchasa is what's aser, and by the kohen it says giluach is aser. So the Gemara is going to have to try to understand how these two things come together. So it says, since it says the Isser's Giluach, so even using a scissors would be chayiv. The Isser is only if the hair is completely destroyed, but when you cut with a scissor, as close as you get, it's not a complete ashkasa. But Eloi Sashchis, if you use some type of tweezers where it completely pulls out the hair at the root, that's a hashchasa. I would think that's chayiv. But in the other pasuk, it expresses it as giluach. Giluach means you're using some type of cutting machine, not a tweezer, to pull out the hair. So how do these two things correspond? Okay, Tzad, it's a giluach sheyesh by hashchasa havi. It has to be giluach sheyesh by hashchasa kama. It has to be cut with a razor or a scissor. It has to be the hair being cut, but it has to be cut so close that it's like the whole hair was destroyed. The best tool to do such an isser would be using a razor. That's where the Tanakhama came to the fact that it needs to be a razor to be over. How does Rabbi Eliezer understand these two psukim? If he's going to compare the two cases of cutting a beard, then liboy he should have came to the same conclusion as we did, explaining the sheet of the Rabbanan. And he loy gomer gzeir shava, and if there's no gzeir shava, well then misparayim nami loy. Then even if you used a regular scissor, it shouldn't be considered a problem. He does learn the gzeir shava. He holds that when you use a tweezer, it also is considered giluach, and therefore it does satisfy giluach, and it satisfies a shchosa, and therefore those will also constitute a lav of a shchosa sukkah. Let's see Rashi. Igam gzeir shava. If Rabbi Eliezer learns gzeir shava, gzeir shava to pay a ka'amar, which compares the two hashchasas hazakin. Misparayim minole the mutar legalechben. If he doesn't learn the gzeir shava, how does he know that you would be allowed to cut with a regular scissors? He is only prohibiting a type of hair removal that constitutes a shchosa. The teretz is he holds that these are also called giluach. Giluchavi hashchasasan oisi giluach claiming giluach mikri the derech legalechben. It will fit under the description of giluach, and therefore it satisfies both hashchas and giluach. That's why he holds that using a tweezer is also as well. Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Hakoshev ksubas kaka. So this is referring to tattooing. So the pasuk says, "V'seret lo nefesh lo titnu b'vsarchem uksovas kaka lo sitnu b'hem." So it's a ksiva that sinks in to the skin. That's usher. That's a tattoo. Ksiv hakoshev ksubas kaka. Kasav v'lo kaka. What if he wrote on his skin? Because Rashi explains that the method of how a tattoo is made is they draw whatever it is that they want, then they slice open the skin to allow the ink to penetrate and settle beneath the skin above the flesh, and that makes it permanent. So what if he just wrote this design? He drew this design, or he wrote whatever he wrote, but he didn't allow it to sink in under the skin, or kaka but he only did it was already written there, and he made it that it should sink in under the skin. Then he has to do both. Biyadai ubikoil. The biyadai is a mistake. It's bidayai. It's with ink. So what does he have to use to create his tattoo? Either dayai ink or koil, which is like some type of colored powder. Ubikoil davar shuroshim. Anything that will make a permanent impression. Rab Shimon ben Yehuda mishum Rab Shimon Omer ein chayav at sheyichtov shom es Hashem. You have to write the shame. We'll see what that means soon. Shenemer k'sovis kaka lo yisitcho b'chem. And what does it say then? Ani Hashem. It's Ani Hashem that's going to be usher. Rashi tells us that Hashem means the name of Avodah Zarah, because be'ikr it was the expression of Avodah Zarah, and that's the main reason why the tattoo is usher. Omer of Acha Bareda Rav Rav Ashi. Ad yichtov Ani Hashem mamish. If you're quoting, you have to write Hashem, and then you're quoting it because the pasuk says, so Ani Hashem, that's the exact nusach that has to be written to violate this lav, and without writing that exact nusach, you're not over the lav. Omer loy, no. Kedetoni bakapora, and yichav et yichtov shema avodas kechovim. So it's not the words of Ani Hashem that has to be written; it's the name of the Avodah Zarah. Shenemer k'sovis kaka lo situ b'chem Ani Hashem v'lo yacher. It's interesting because there's a there's a ger in Toronto that had a tattoo of a Chinese god tattooed on his back. So that's mamish what the ikar isser of tattoo is, the name of a god, of an avodah zarah. And it was very expensive to remove that with laser. So what he ended up doing was he just added another tattoo and he crossed it out. He made an X over it. I never saw this person in the mikveh, but that's what they say. Amr Malchia. So we know there's been a pair of Ronim. One was Malchia and one was Malchioi.
Does he have to say Ani? He declares himself on the tattoo as the Avodah Zarah? Ani Hashem, the Ani has to be there?
Well, that was a Havamina. The Maskana is that he doesn't even write Hashem's name at all. It just means he has to write the name of an Avodah Zarah.
And without the Ani, you mean?
Yeah, without.
But so what does it mean in the Mishnah Ani Hashem?
I think all the Mishnah is trying to illustrate is there has to be the name. Well, look, the Havamina was that it would need to say the Hashem. The Maskana is Vivalt Hashem is restating that I am the God right after Ksevus Kaka. It must be that Ksevus Kaka is an expression of Avodah Zarah. Because Baruch Hu, right after he gives that tzivoy, is reasserting Ani Hashem. In other words, don't place the name of an Avodah Zarah on you because Ani Hashem.
Oh, okay.
Amar of Malchiyah. So Rav Malchiyah with the Aleph said in the name of Amar of Adar Bar Abba. Oh, good morning. So it's some type of earth that would leave an impression. Don't put it on a wound because it's going to end up remaining there. It'll discolor your skin permanently, similar to a tattoo. So don't even use that as a dressing for a wound. It could resemble a tattoo. Omar, let's just see the Dalid. Omar Rav Chinina, Barei Rav Ika. Rav Chinin, the son of Rabbi said, Shvud, Shvachos, V'Gumos. There were three Mishnayos. One was called Shvud, one was called Shvachos, and one was called Gumos. What are they about? Rashi says the Mishnah of Shvud, it's a Mishnah, is talking about a Shvud that you roasted with on Shabbos or Yom, not on Shabbos. You roasted on before Shabbos or on Yom Tov, it becomes muksa. So there's a discussion about that. So that Mishnah that discusses that, Shvachos, is a Mishnah that talks about a woman has certain responsibilities that she has to do at home, certain housekeeping responsibilities. But if a woman brings in to her marriage four maidservants, then she doesn't have to do any work at all. And there's an argument in that Mishnah that maybe she still has to do some work because a woman who has no responsibilities whatsoever is going to get into trouble. And the gumais is if normally when a hair grows to show that somebody is an adult, there's a little dimple where the hair grows out of. What if you had those dimples, there was no hair there? Is that a sign that there was hair there, that fell out or not? So that's that discussion. So the three Mishnayos that are discussing these three items are Rav Malchiyah. Rav Malchiyah said these ones. And Beluris, for Mikla and Gavina, Beluris is when if a Jewish barber that's cutting the hair of a goy, he has to stay away from the Beluris because it's a shtickle of a Zorah. So the Mishnah discusses that. Well, it might be a Mishnah, it might be a Gemara. For Mikla, which is what we've just discussed right now, and we said Allah in the name of her Malchiyah, and Gavina, the question of the Gavinas of Goyim, who said these halachas? Rav Malchiyah. So what happened was there was these six halachas, and it's hard to know who said which halacha because Rav Malchiyah and Rav Malchiyah have similar names. So therefore, Rav Chida tried to make it clear for us that we should know once and for all. The three Mishnayos, Shvut, Shvachis, and Gumos were discussed by Rav Malchiyah, and the three halachas of Ever Mikvah, the two halachas of Ever Mikvah and Gavina the three halachos of Buluris, Ever Mikla and Gibina were discussed by Rav Malchiyah Uta Aleph. Rav Papa Amar a little bit different. He says that the best way to remember it is as follows: Masnisinu Masnisa. Anything that's quoted from Tanoim, that would be Rav Malchiyah. And because just like the Masnisa ends with the Aleph, the Malchiyah ends with the Aleph, so it's an easy way to remember. The halachas from this group that are quoted from a Braisa, Rav Malchiyah was the one who quoted it. Shmaitza, but halachas that were said just by the Amirayim from this group, Rav Malchiyah said them. The Simonech, and a good way to remember it is Masnisa Malchasa, the Aleph and the Aleph. So Rav Malchiyah is the one who related over the things that were quoted in the Mishnayos, and the halachas that are Stam Gemaras are the halachas that were quoted by Rav Malchiyah. My Beinayim, what's the difference between Rav Papa's method that Malchiyah, Masnisa, and Malchiyah Shemaitza, and Rav Chinina's listing of those three belonging to Rav Malchiyah and the other three belong to Rav Malchiyah? Ikabana, there's only one difference, and that's Shvachos. the halach of Shvachos, which Rav Chinina said that it was said over by Rav Malchiyah, that Shvachos is a Braisa, and in fact, it should go under the heading of Rav Malchiyah. So that's the only difference between how Rav Papa classified them and Rav Chinina. If Shvachos was said by Rav Malchiyah, as it is according to Rav Papa, or Malchiyah according to Rav Chinina. Ma'abina ikunan Shvachos. Rabbi bar Abaye kapid afilu arivda duku silta. Rabbi was so careful not to put Efer Mikla on his skin, never mind if there was a wound, but even if he had to be Makos dam and there was a small pinprick, even there he wouldn't put this because he was afraid that it should leave a permanent image. Rav Ashi Amar, kol mokoim sheyesha maka makasay mechichala. He holds it's not a problem if you put it on a wound and it maintained the constant coloring of his skin, because everyone could see the scarring. It would be obvious with that discoloration that might look like a tattoo. It's obvious that that was the place where there was once a wound there, so it wouldn't be confused with a ksevas kap. Dr. Henry Mishnah Weiter. We had this Mishnah quoted yesterday. Nazir shahaya shoyse yain kolayin. A Nazir was drinking wine all day. Ein chayiv ela achas. He only gets one set of malchus, for the Nazir is not allowed to drink wine. Amrullah, but what if they were warning him? Al tishta, and even though they warned him, at each time they warned him, he drank again. So that breaks up his chiyuvim, and therefore chayiv al kolachas vachas. What if he was being metamal mesim? Another thing that a Nazir may not do, kolayim, and a chayiv al achas is only chayiv once. Amrullah al tatame v'umatame, then he's chayiv al kolachas vachas. The same thing is with giluach. Hayimigaleach kolayim. Because we know a Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair. But Amrullah al tegaleich v'umagaleich, then he's chayiv al kol achas vachas. Separately? I'm not sure, but I think it might come out in the Gemara, the difference between the cases. Now we're no longer talking about a Nazir, we're talking about anybody. Someone is wearing Klaim a whole day. Is only chayv once. Armaloi al tilbash, and who poishet for loivesh, and he takes it off and puts it on again. And the Gemara is going to focus on what that constitutes. Then chayv al kol achas v'achas. Turning over onto Chafala from the base. Yesh chayresh telemechad. It's possible that you could merely do a simple act, such as plowing one row in a field, and you will be over v'chayiv olav mishum shmoin olavin, and you'll end up being over 8 lavin in one action. And what would the case be? Hachoyesh b'shor v'chamar. So the first aver you could possibly be over in this little simple act is if you were using a shor and a chamar, that would be klayim. V'hei mikdoshim, if they're hektish, which is a big shaila between Rashi and Tosfos, what it means. But the pashtus that Rashi learns is that they're asur b'hana. So Rashi brings, or the Rivan brings one shot that it's a Peter Chamor, and it's a Bechor Shor. So we're talking about a Bechor, but there are those who learn that it's just speaking that they were karbonos, and Shor v'Chamor is lavdavka becoming Shor v'Seh. So now you have another two violations. So you have shatnez, and then you have the two violations of the hektish. Uklayim bekerem, and if what you were plowing was klayim, that'll be violation number 4. Ubishvius, if you were doing this plowing on a shemitah year, that will be a violation number 5. The yomtiv, if it was yomtiv when you were plowing where you're not allowed to plow, that will be a violation number 6. The kohen, and if he was a kohen, the nazir, and a nazir, the veis hatuma, in a place where it was tummy. So it's possible to be over 80 surim in one little act. The Gemara is going to ask, if you're looking to create a scenario where with one act somebody is being over multiple isurim, I have many more suggestions of things that you could have done that could have made this even worse, and the Gemara is going to deal with those. But at this point, we see that you can combine so many isurim into one simple little act. Chananya ben Chachinoy Omer, Afa loivish klayim. Why did you add on another Avera here? That while he was doing all this, he was wearing klayim. They told him, Einoi Hashem, we're looking for something that's only coming from the plowing, a side thing that has nothing to do with it, because he happens to be wearing klayim at the time. That's not what type of combined Avera, that's not the type of cluster bomb that we're looking for. Amar lahem, so he said, if that's the case, then af hanozir loihu Hashem. So you're saying he's a nazir and he's in a basic forest, that also has nothing to do with the plowing. So if you're going to include that in your cluster bomb, why not also include wearing klayim? Zok the head of the Gemara. Amar Bibi, Amar Yosy. Is it poshet v'loivesh? Poshet v'loivesh mamish? Does he literally have to take off the beged? Because we're talking about a beged of klayim. Does he literally have to take it off and put it on in order for him to be over? Or maybe afilu machnas umoitzi beisyad unkali shaloi. Or maybe if he just puts his arm in the sleeve, even though he didn't completely put it on, maybe that would also constitute wearing the klayim, where he can get multiple malchios if he's warned each time he does this. So machvi Rab Acha Barei Rav Ika. Do you have an article? Is it machvi? Am I reading the word right, or is it mochli? Machve. Okay. So machve Rab Acha Barei Rav Ika iyuli v'afuke. So he showed that it means iyuli v'afuke, which I believe Rashi says mamish. You actually have to. You can't just put your arm in the sleeve. In order that there should be a chiv klayim, he has to actually put it on. Rashi Omer afilu lo shah ela kedei lifshoit v'lo v'shchayiv. You don't have to. So Rashi's on the other extreme of halacha. Never mind, you don't have to take it off and put it on. You can continue wearing it. And all the Mishnah means, where it says you keep on putting it on, it means you wait the amount of time that you could have taken it off and put it back on again. That would create an additional chiyuv of Makos for wearing kalayim if there was multiple asaris. Yesh charish tell him, you could have one simple act that will literally a cluster of averos. Rabbi Yanai said, "B'chabura nimnu v'gamru." In the group we were learning this Mishnah, and this is how we understood what's going on over here. Hachoifa b'klayim loike. Now there was a shaila if merely being mekayim klayim, you get loike by merely letting it continue to grow and prosper, and that's one thing you could have learned out of our Mishnah here is plowing is like helping it continue. Or maybe that's not enough to be over climb. You have to actually take an action to help it grow. So there are nimnu b'chabura that a chayfa b'klayim loika, by doing an action, you would get malchus. Amar lahen Rabbi Yochanan said, Lav Mishnah seinu hizu, wouldn't our Mishnah be telling us that halacha? Yesh chayresh telam echad, Our Mishnah says you can plow one row, the chayiv alav mishum shmoin lavin, and you'll be chayiv 8 lavin, and one of them was hacharish b'shor v'chamor vein mikdoshim uklayim b'kerem. So high chayrish, the charisha of klayim b'kerem that our Mishnah is discussing, the mechayiv mishum klayim hechi mishkachas la. Precisely what happened. Lav the michsi b'hadei da'azel. As he was plowing, he covered over some seeds with earth. That's like planting. That is really saying what you're saying. So you had this big epiphany that that's exactly what our Mishnah seems to be saying, which is why the plowing with klayim was a violation. Amar lei, so he responded back. So he responded back to Rabbi Yochanan, Ilav the daloi lach chaspa mi mishkachas marganisa tusa. If I wouldn't have raised this subject, you would have never known that there's a beautiful halacha to be learned here, and that is that our Mishnah is saying that a chayfa is chayiv. So what Rashi says over here is the loy hagba'as. If I didn't pick up this rock to uncover this beautiful halacha, mi mishkachas marganisa, the lav the amrilach. If I wouldn't have told this to you, have a amrit, you would have said chayresh to mechayiv b'klayim. You would have learned pshat in the Mishnah, lav mishum zareya el mishum mekayim the shavak v'loy akalahu. So Rabbi Yanai told Rabbi Yochanan, yes, you brought a rye from our Mishnah, but you would have never chapped that was pshat in the Mishnah if I didn't bring out that distinction that a chayv b'klayim is also because you actually did something, an act of planting. Now that I brought it up, now you were able to point to the Mishnah. So because I brought up the Shaila, you now had a better understanding of the Mishnah. Amar le Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. So Rish Lakish told Rabbi Yochanan, I disagree with you. Ilav the kills of Gava Rabbo, if Rabbi Yanai hadn't praised you for learning Pshat in the Mishnah this way, I could have learned completely different Pshat in the Mishnah. Havamina must nisin mani Rabbi Kivahi. I would have learned that you don't need to do a Maisa Zriya to be over on Klayim. And the pshat in the Mishnah is that the Charisha caused the seed to get covered, and that was like planting. No, I would have learned like Rabbi Kiva, the Amar HaMakayim B'Kayim Loika, HaMakayim Klayim Loika. You don't have to actually plant. Merely allowing it to prosper in your field and not uprooting it, that's also a violation of the Klayim, and that's what he was doing with his plowing. My Rabbi Kiva, where did Rabbi Kiva express this opinion? The Tanya we learned, Hamanachesh, if somebody is pulling weeds out, V'machapa b'klayim, and someone who covers over a seed by klayim, loiki gets Makos, and Rabbi Kiva were af hamakayim, which Rashi tells us he's not adding af hamakayim. Rashi says kula Rabbi Kiva ka'amarla. The whole brisa is Rabbi Kiva, even Menachich and Mechapa, and what Rabbi Kiva is saying is Hanachish of Mechapa b'klayim loika dimekayim. The reason why Menachish and Mechapa are chayiv is not because it's a Maisis Riyah. It's because it's just like Mekayim, and the Isser is Mekayim. My time with Rabbi Kiva. Where does Rabbi Kiva see that the Isser of plowing is not literally doing a mice at the plant? It's merely not destroying and allowing it to prosper. The Tanya we learned, it says, Sadcha loy sizra kalayim. You should not plant your sadha with kalayim. That very much sounds like you have to do a maisis riyah. Ainli alazareya. Mekayim inayin. How do we know that merely allowing existing kalayim to remain, how do we know that's the violation as well? Zok to Gemara, Talmud Leimer, kalayim sadcha loy. Let's look at the structure of the pasuk and everything comes out clear. Es chukoisai tishmaru behemdecha loy sarbi aklayim, comma sadcha loy sizra klayim. That's one way you can read it. But we're darshaning as follows. Instead of saying behemdecha loy sarbi aklayim, let's use klayim and connect it to the next clause. Klayim sadcha loy. There should be no klayim in your field at all. Meaning, whether you put it there or not, you're not even allowed to allow it to remain. That is the mikor of Rabbi Kiva. Merely being Mekayim Klayim will be a violation. Yeah, you read it both ways. That's how drash works sometimes. That it doesn't necessarily work perfectly. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's where lows came from because it's multiple lows. Amar le ula Rab Nachman. If you're talking about clusters of isurim, I could find your isurim that you could tack on to this ma'aser. Amar le ula Rab Nachman v'lilki nami mishum zarei b'yomtiv. Why isn't he also part of what he's doing is planting? He's causing it to get covered over the earth. The seeds are getting covered over. So why isn't he also getting another set of malchus for planting on Yom Tov? Amalei Tana v'Shire and Nechanami. There are other isurim that he might be over. So the Gemara, so Ula told him, how can you say that? Amalei Tana Katani Shmoina. The Tana lists off a number. When the Tana lists off a number, you can't say Tana v'Shire. The Atam Tana v'Shire. If the Tana is casually listing things off, you could say he missed things. But if he's telling you there's 8 things, how could you argue that there are more things? Zok to Gemara, Amar Rabba. Let me see if I can find the Gimel in the Bach. Amar Rabba, yeah. Yesh chiluk malachos b'Shabbos vein chiluk malachos b'Yom Tov. A new chiddush. On Shabbos, we know Havara l'chalak yotzes. Every single Isser that you do on Shabbos is a separate Isser, separate chatas for it. However, on Yom Tov, it's only one Isser. And therefore, no matter what violations you do on Yom Tov, we all consider it one lav. And we've already used up Yom Tov because you were plowing on Yom Tov. Once there's one malchus for Yom Tov, there's not going to be another. Amalei, he told him, you know what, you're 100% right. That is the right pshat. Ada Tehei, which the Bach teaches as K'moy Zois Hisvara Nachayna. You're 100% right. The Lekachashav the Lilki Mishum Zareh Yom Tov, it didn't list off another Malchus for planning on Yom Tov, Mishum the Kachashav Chayrish B'Yom Tov, because we already listed Chayrish B'Yom Tov, which is a violation of Yom Tov. The Eine Chayiv Beis a Beis Malachus B'Yom Tov. If you did 2 separate malachas b'vasachas on Yom Tov, you don't get 2 malchus for it, unlike Shabbos, where each one would be its own violation. Zok to Gemara, Eisvei Abaye. Are you telling me the ein chiluk malachas b'Yom Tov? Are you actually saying that? But none be learned. Hamavashul giranosha b'cholav. If you cooked a giranosha in milk, b'Yom Tov on Yom Tov, v'achloi, and then you ate it on Yom Tov, like a chomesh, he will get 5 malchus for this activity. Like a mishum eichel gid, the first malchus is he ate gid anasha. It says alkein lo yoichlu b'nei Yisrael mi gid anasha. But like a mishum avashel b'Yom Tov, he gets malchus for cooking on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov if it's shaloi l'tzorich, and this is shaloi l'tzorich because you're cooking something that you're not allowed to eat, right? V'loika mishum mevashel gid b'chalav. There's the iser basar b'chalav even includes not only eating basar b'chalav but cooking it. So that's iser number 3. V'loika mishum oichel basar b'chalav. Then he gets malchus because not only did he cook it but he ate it as well. And malchus number 5. V'loika mishum havara. But the problem is havara is a violation of Yom Tov. Cooking shaloi l'tzorich is a violation of Yom Tov. If you're going to tell me you're only over one violation when you do multiple averos on Yom Tov be'alamachas, v'mi'isa mishum avora loy l'chayiv, the halachayiv loy mishum bishuloi. In this scenario, they made a skit and did all those things. It would involve 5 yisur. So Zaktima, you're right. You're right. We can't have 2 chiyuvim for Yom Tov. So apik havara, take out havara, and for number 5, we'll put in the ayil gid hanosha shel nevela. We'll say this whole animal was a nevela, so there's an issue nevela involved here as well. But the problem is, we learned Reb Chia taught us in Braisa that out of these 5 yisurim, 2 are for the eating, and there's 3 for the cooking. If you're going to take out havara and put in Giranash Shel Nevela is not an issue of cooking, that's an issue of achila. So then there's sholosh ala chilosai hu chayiv. He's chayiv 3 for the achila and 2 for the cooking. Ella apik avora, we still have to take out avora because, as we said, you can't have 2 violations for Yom Tov, but for ayil atzei asher. And say that the wood that he used was wood from an Asherah, and that's what he was over. But as hartem in hacha v'lo yidbak b'yotcha hu'um acherim. So you're not allowed to benefit from wood of the Asherah, and that's the avla that he did. Amalei Rabacha b'Rei Rabashi. Okay, you want to pile on Isurim? V'lil kanami mishum loisavi toyeva al beisecha. That wood is a toyeva. It's wood from an Asherah. So there should be another set of malchus. Besides lo yidbak b'yotcha, there should also be another violation of loisavi toyeva al beisecha. Elaha'am b'mayaskinan going shebishlu ba'atzei hektish. He didn't use atzei Asherah, he used atzei hektish. So therefore, atzei Asherah would involve 2 averos. Side the lo yidbak and side the loisavi. We don't have that, but we have hektish. What's the issue of hektish? You're allowed to destroy. You're supposed to destroy avodah zarah, but you're not allowed to destroy hektish. So the Mefarshim tell us we're not talking about firewood. Firewood is designed to be burned. It wouldn't constitute loisasum kein Hashem alekechem. It's big where you used good wood that could have been used for building. You used fresh 2x4s. You didn't use old skids. You used fresh 2x4s, and that would constitute the issue of destroying something of hektish. And on that, the pasuk says, "Loisasem kein l'shem alekechem." Simin shinvoi shenaz maskif la Rab Hoshia. Rab Hoshia has the kasha. V'lechshav nami hazeireya b'nachal. This story could have occurred in Nachal, which is where we chop off the head of the Eglah Rufa, and you're not allowed to plant there. So if you're looking to create an action of plowing that can involve Moyasurim, why don't you say that this story occurred in Nachal? You're not allowed to work there, you're not allowed to plant there, and you're plowing to plant. Why don't you say there's a Hashem written on the ground, and as you're walking over there, you're rubbing out Hashem. And if you want to create a cocktail and a cluster bomb of Averis, we can pack this story up, adding little tidbits to it that'll involve many Averis. Which is the pasuk we quoted earlier. Why did you say that he had a neg on his hand? And as he was walking, he's banging into something that's cutting off his beheres. You could devise and engineer crazy scenarios that will include so many more beheres, if that's what your intention is to do. Figure out how it could have been that the Kohen Gadol was there and he knocked off the choshen. I mean, if you really want to think of cases where you want to pack on the Isurim, do that. Or a maser bad the Oren, or someone who, while he was doing this, pulled the bottom out of the Oren. And v'lo yisach hachoshen. Matzkel Rabashi. V'lachshav nami achorish ba'atzei asherah. Why don't you say he used atzei asherah to do the charisha? V'asarim hacha. V'lo yidlik b'yotchem u'uma. Maybe while he was plowing, he knocked out a fruit tree. Why don't you say he had made a shvur that he won't do charisha, and now you have another violation to pile up on here? So no, that's different. The shvur would never have been chal, because you can't swear I'm not going to plow on Yom Tov, because mushba v'oimid mahar sinayu. It wouldn't even be a valid shvua. Nishba l'kaimis a mitzvah is not a good shvua because you're already mushba v'oimid mahar sinayu not to do malacha on Yom Tov. Amar le'shahabat going to Amar shvua shalei echreish bein b'choil bein b'Yom Tov the migu dechala alei shvua b'choil chala alei nami b'Yom Tov. That's called Isser Koilo. Since my shvua is not only including Yom Tov, it's including many other days, so the shvua is chal because of the other days, it'll be chal on Yom Tov as well. So Dr. Gemara, the reason why I didn't pick shvua is midi the isei b'sheila loikatani. Even our Mishnah has limitations. What does it discriminate against? Something that you can be showing on, that's not the type of isser that our Mishnah wanted to list. What are you talking about? Very hektish. one of the cases was you used a vehim effect. Say that you can be shaylam. So no, I know, but the type of effect we're referring to is a bechar. A bechar is called the merechem. But a nazir, you could be shaylam in naziris. No, it's been nazir shimshin that the malach made him into a nazir. So it wasn't something that he could be shaylam because it's not his naziris. Correct more, but nazir shimshin bar tamula mesinu. One of the various you said is that he's a nazir that became tamei. But we know that the naziris of shimshin did not prohibit becoming tamei. Ella, just say hi Tana Isser Koila lastly. Let's just say let's abort the parrots that we're not talking about things that are Isa B'Shela, because we are including those. The reason why it's Shavuot doesn't work is because this Tana does not hold the Isser Koila. So therefore, even though you made a Shavuot to include any other days you won't plow, it still will not be Chal on Yom Tov. Amar Abayishi Hamarbia Shor Psuli Hamektoshim. What if this is a very fascinating situation here? You have a shor that psulei mikdoshim. So it was a carbon, it got a mum, and now you redeem it. So the halacha is you're allowed to eat it, but you're not allowed to do avoida with it. And the pasuk says we used it yesterday. Lagabe hilchas tuma. It says. There's no pasuk quoted over here. So the thing about a sharp psul doshim is that it has certain properties of kedusha, such as you're not allowed to avoid it with it, you're not allowed to milk it, you're not allowed to shear its wool. You're only allowed to eat it. So it has properties of hulin and properties of kodesh. So if you had it live with another animal, you bred it with another animal, you get two malchus. You know why? Sai you didn't avoid it, but sai it's climb here because you're mixing the side that's hulin is mixing with the side that is kodesh. So that's where the climb is. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos learns the Torah compares it to chatzvi v'chayil, so therefore it is half tzvi, half ayil. But whatever the case is, it would involve kalayim. Omer b'Yitzchak hamamig b'shor psuli hamekdoshim loike. If you even used a shor psuli hamekdoshim to pull a wagon, you're being over loisachroish b'shor v'chamor yachtov. You're being over climb sharei guf echatu v'asa kosav kishnei gufim. It's really one animal. But the Torah considers it two gufim, half kodesh, half choil, according to Rashi, or katzvi v'chayil. So one animal, that's one species, is considered two animals that would be considered climb. At the end of the day, I didn't answer Dovi's question, why there's a list of all those things. I don't know the answer to that. I thought maybe the Gemara would talk about it. Zok the Gemara weiter. Kama malka noisai. How much, when you give someone malchus, how many malchus do you give him? Zok the Mishnah arboim chaser achas. The full dose is 39 malchus. Shenamar, it says, b'mispar arboim. The Lashon HaPasuk is very, very interesting. It says, if you look at the pasuk before, v'haya im bin hakoisa rasha, if Bezdin pasuk this guy needs to get malchus, v'pilu hashoyvet, v'kol afanov, kidei rishasoi b'mispar, end of the pasuk. New pasuk are boy makenu lo yosef. But we read it together, b'mispar arboim. It's the count on the way to 40. What is the number on the way to 40 when you're counting? The number on the way to 40 is 39. How do you know? A number that's near 40. It's a full 40. It's not 39. We're going to learn that they give him malchus in sets of 3 that were on his back. But number 40 is not divisible by 3. So that's this extra whack, this extra lash. Where does he take that? Bank safe of in between his shoulders. We're going to see that's not where the regular malchus is given. When Bezdin is assessing how many malchus he can handle, it has to be in 3. It has to be a multiple of 3. What if they assessed him that he can get 40? And v'loka miktas, we hit him with 20, and at 20 we realized that he can't go further. It's detrimental to his health. V'amru she'ein yochel lakabel arboim. V'amdu, then they realized they assessed him mid malchus that he can't handle anymore. Potter, he's now potter with whatever he got. It will be enough for him. And the Gemara Rashi tells us it's because he was already mevuzeh with the malchus that he received, that we don't put him through it again. Amdul Kabul Shemoina Esrei. What if they assessed him that he can only handle 18? And while they were beating him, they realized, you know what, this guy can do more. Potter, because once he was assessed, he did his 18, he's Potter, they can't come back for a double jeopardy. Okay, we will stop here, and B'ez Hashem, we will continue tomorrow. So Chav Beis is actually Wednesday's block, I believe, right? Because we learned today Chav Aleph was Tuesday block, Chav Beis is Wednesday. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to finish Daf Chav Gimel, which will be Tuesday. Wednesday, I hope to finish the Masechta and start Shavuos. Okay, everyone should have an awesome, awesome day.